What's up, everyone? We're back in the garage. It's been a minute. We've been busy with a lot of other things going on in life, so I haven't had a chance to make a YouTube video in a minute. But with that being said, a part finally came in that I'm excited to share with you guys, and that is the GR Intake. So if you're not familiar, this is a GR86 or BRZ. For Toyota, at least in the North America market, they offer a factory OEM intake that is different than the one that comes on the car from the factory. It is one of the few intakes that are actually on the market that are allegedly proven to give the car some gains, maybe some slight noticeable intake noises or induction noise changes. I think that's probably more reasonable just because of the fact that it eliminates some of the sound resonators that the factory box has. Now, with that being said, I already have a Grimspeed intake tube installed to my factory airbox, so I've already eliminated one of the resonators. I still have the second one that's coming off the side of the airbox. I never removed it, I just left it as is, but I really didn't notice too much of a sound difference, so I'm not quite sure that this intake is really going to make too terribly much more noise than the factory airbox does. So with that being said, let me show you what I'm talking about, and then we'll go through, get this thing installed, and see what it sounds like. Okay, so I figured if you were interested in this video, you may want the part number. So I'm going to put it right there. It's PTR03-18221. The cool thing is it's a TRD product, which is ironic because it's a GR product. It's Toyota Motor Sales USA, and then it actually says made in the USA, which makes me believe that this intake is probably made by K&N, because if you're familiar with the aftermarket world, K&N makes incredibly good intake systems. I would imagine Toyota probably contracted to them and asked them to make this. I do know that the GR or TRD drop-in filters that they have, I believe those are made by K&N as well. So it's all the more reason that the intake is made by them too. But if you know that or can confirm that, throw that in the comments below. I'd love to know if that's a legit thing, if Toyota North America contracted out K&N to make this intake. All right, let's get this box opened up, check it out, see what the intake looks like. I would imagine there's an intake tube, and a pretty large air filter, because this particular intake actually has pretty long air box. Yep, in fact, right there at the top, there's the air filter. There is the filter part number, in case you would like that. Probably wouldn't hurt to get a separate one of those just to have on the side. I mean, those filters should probably outlast the car in a lot of ways, but they do go bad, even though you can re-oil them, so it's probably not a bad idea to pick up a spare. Okay, so 2 hose clamps, a red intake tube, which I would prefer if it was black, honestly. I like the subtle. That's why I like the Grimspeed tube, is it almost could pass for, you know, if it didn't say Grimspeed on it, if you didn't know what you were looking at, it could almost pass for a factory part, because it just kind of blends into the engine bay. But nonetheless, we'll put the bright red one on there and see what it does. So this appears to be the back part of the intake. Oh, I think that was a bracket. Yep. Don't throw your parts away. So, yep, there. Actually, that's the front. So, you see, nice GR badge there. We'll take the plastic off once it's installed. Factory snorkel, that actually goes behind the front bumper. So that it just clips into the factory cold air snorkel that the OEM box clips into, which is nice, which to be expected with a factory part. Factory mounting points, so you really don't have to modify the car. So that's the front of the box. Look at the back of the box really quick. I am a little bit disappointed. I knew this before I ordered it, but still disappointing to see it in person. That I get it's a factory part, so it's not surprising it has this, but still surprising that it has the little charcoal pre-filter thingies like the factory box, and it's been pretty well documented that these rob the car of some power, but it's an EPA thing, I'm sure, so you got to leave them on there. But you almost kind of think about it, you know, if you had to put this in front of your face and breathe, it's going to be much harder to breathe, whereas if this wasn't in front of you, it'd be easier to breathe. So cars the same way. It probably would be better if it wasn't there, but it is what it is. And then here is the long filter I was telling you about. So you can see pretty long. Looks exactly like a K&N. I would be curious to know if K&N's logo is embossed somewhere on here, but I don't know. We'll check that out when we get to the install. So that's the intake. Like I said, red intake tube. It's 2 halves, and just bolts right in where the factory one is. I'll show you what I have. I'll get up close and show you what the current setup looks like. Okay, so current setup, if you're not familiar with these cars, so get the new one out of the way. So you have a resonator here. I think there's actually a couple different terms for this, but some people believe there's like a Venturi effect. Most people believe it's for sound, but on the factory intake, there is this tube. Actually, I'll show you. Okay, so you can see there, Subaru Denso, factory intake tube goes like this. So from the factory, it'll be like that. And you can see the corresponding hole for this tube right here. That goes into the throttle body. This comes around to the airbox. Underneath, you have this little resonator in addition to this one. So the Grimspeed intake that I had already installed eliminated the first one, and then this GR setup is actually going to eliminate both. The box doesn't have this, and then the tube, which is in here, it doesn't have the little piece at the bottom. Okay, so we'll take a look at the setup I have currently right now, and then I will throw you guys on a time lapse, and I will get this thing installed, and then I'll come back to you. And I guess before we install it, I might as well do a before and after in terms of sound. Again, I don't believe there's going to be much, if any, sound difference, given the fact that I've already put an intake on here, essentially. But it's for the internet. Let's see what it does. Okay, I got the car pulled out a little bit so I can rev it. I also have a Borla S-type exhaust, so it's probably not going to come up very well with the intake noise, but take this microphone off me. Let's see. I'll set it right beside the intake, actually. Oh, there we go. Flip it to the airbox. Okay, so it seemed like you could hear a little bit of the induction sound with the microphone. Like I said, I don't really anticipate there being much of a difference in sound from this setup versus the GR setup. But nonetheless, we'll get this tore apart, put the new one in, and then I'll come back to you guys. So I'll throw it up on a time lapse. You can watch me do this in like 30x the speed. That way you don't get bored. And then I'll come back and give you my final impressions on this intake. Okay guys, so hopefully you could tell by the time lapse, really it didn't take very long to install this. I didn't expect it would. There's a couple of things that I didn't see many people mention. One is, at least on their install videos, I should say, one is there's a little rubber grommet that goes at the front of the intake, and it actually goes into a hole that's already in the core support. So you put the grommet in there, and then the front of the intake slips into that grommet. The other thing is this, I forget what this is called at the top of my head, but this hose that goes into the top of the intake, I've seen a couple of videos where people can't get this to sit flush, and it definitely is designed to sit flush. I also struggled with getting it to fully seat into the intake boot when I was installing this. I went and used mass airflow cleaner because, one, I had it on the shelf, 2, it evaporates really quickly, and then 3, I know it won't fiddle with the mass airflow sensor because it's designed for that. So sprayed a little bit in there, and before it evaporated, I was able to push that thing all the way in, get it seated, and put the clamp in. But I'll take the camera closer, and I'll point these things out to you as well. Okay, so the first thing is, there is the little grommet I'm talking about, and let's see if I could do this. So that little piece right there that my finger's on, that is a rubber grommet that comes with the kit. And then, as you can see, the front of the intake slips down into that, so definitely make sure you don't miss that. Another thing I saw on a couple of people's videos is they were saying that this won't clip into that, but it clipped for mine, and it's not in the way of anything, so I don't really know what's going on there. And then, as mentioned, there's been a couple of videos I've seen where folks aren't able to get that to seat like mine is. If you see, it sits completely flush like it's designed to do. So yeah, the mass airflow cleaner trick did the job for me. Got it a little bit wet on the inside of that, slipped it right in, and then it evaporated, so I don't have to worry about it. Definitely want to highlight the intake boot itself has like a little tang on it. So if you can see there, it recesses into the side of the box, and then it also has a recess there for the tang that's on the throttle body. So you want to make sure that stuff's lined up so that everything clearances correctly, everything stalls correctly. I will say I wasn't a huge fan of the red, especially when I was ordering this intake, but I gotta tell you, it's subtle enough that it really doesn't bother me. I guess the last thing we gotta do is we gotta take this little plastic off here. See if we can capture a little ASMR for the gram. And there we go. GR intake has been installed, guys. Okay, guys, so before I go, if you made it this far in the video, I did want to share the fact that I actually picked this intake up from my local dealership. There's a number of people that are selling these things online, drop shippers, etc. I know you can import them. I know you can get them from Black Hawk, Japan, possibly if they've got them in stock. But your local dealership can actually get these. And one trick that I've learned, having 3 Toyotas, is if you actually sign up for their newsletter, and they're actually pretty good, I will say. A lot of companies spam your email. Toyota's pretty good about it. But if you sign up for the newsletter, they often will give you coupons, particularly around holidays. So beginning of the year, this is 2025, beginning of the year, they had a coupon. It was like 25% off, you know, aftermarket, or not aftermarket, performance accessories, things like that. And at the time, this is when these were really starting to gain traction, but there's a number of people selling these things for like $600, $700, $800. I was able to pick this thing up with the coupon for $424. In fact, $424 all in, counting the tax. That's $24 worth of taxes. The total discount I got was $100 off. It was typically a $500 intake. So, again, I would search around. That's the price that I paid for it. That's what I would try to get it for, is around that $424 mark. I guess if taxes are higher in your area, it may be a little more, but try to get it for about $400. That's what I think that's what this is worth. I don't think I'd pay much more than that. If I was going to pay more than that, I'd probably buy that crazy carbon fiber intake that Kevin Vo has, honestly. But that being said, my initial thoughts are, looks clean as expected. It's an OEM part. Really like the GR badging. It's very pronounced right there on the front. It really catches your eye when you open the hood. Again, wasn't initially a fan of the red, but I think it's just subtle enough, particularly since this is all factory black and it matches the plastics everywhere else, that it's a non-issue. But I'll drive this thing around, depending on how that goes. Maybe I'll throw in a clip at the end of, actually I will. I'll tell you what, if you made it this far in the video, I will throw in a clip of revving the engine up and driving it a little bit, and that way you get an idea of what the sound does. Okay, we got this thing installed. We'll crank it up, see if it makes any difference. Hopefully you could hear that. Not much of a difference from what I had. Like I said, I had an aftermarket intake already on the car, or intake tube I should say, but we'll drive it, we'll see what it does. What's up everybody? It's actually the next day. I kind of spaced out, took the car for a drive last night, didn't record it. Truthfully, the noise is about the same as it was with the Grimspeed intake, as I expected, but will say I am very pleased with the intake. I do very much enjoy the look of it, despite being a little on the fence about the red intake tube. But besides that, I do think it's still it's a very comparable whooshing sound that you'll get from many aftermarket intakes, with a very much factory OEM plus part, which is kind of cool. You don't have to worry about voiding your warranty. You get the same aesthetics as a factory install, essentially, but you do get the benefits of an aftermarket intake performance and sound. But I did promise you guys, if you made it this long in the video, I would put a clip of me driving this thing with the new intake on, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to pull this thing out, and then I'll take you guys for a quick drive. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive the car right now at a low speed, and then I'm going to drive it at a higher speed, that way you can hear the sound differences. I do have the active engine noise still plugged in. It's never bothered me, even when I had factory exhaust and everything. But I'll turn the air conditioning off. Radio is off, of course. You can just listen. This is at low speed. And then turning on to a higher speed road. Hopefully it picked it up pretty decently. Get a little bit of induction noise. I don't know if the microphone's going to pick that up or not, but you certainly can hear the Borla S-type exhaust. And I will say, not sponsored by Borla, but I got to hand it to them. At least for the S-Type, I know the Attack can be like a little bit crazy, but the S-Type is that sweet spot. I've had a couple of people actually come up to me out in public and ask me what exhaust I have, because it's just subtle enough that it gives you that nice tone, but it's not so crazy that it blows your eardrums out. And when you're cruising, the last thing I want is droning. It just makes the drive not enjoyable. So if you throw it all the way down into 6th gear, it almost becomes quiet. and it's kind of nice. And then of course if you get on it, you know, and then if you downshift and get on it, but when you want it to be quiet, kind of nice.